The rain hammered against the ambulance bay like gunfire. I was halfway through my third double shift when the trauma doors burst open and chaos spilled in. Gunshot wound to the chest. Multiple hits. He's coding. The gurney slammed through the hallway. Blood soaked the white sheets. A man lay there, face pale as death, dark hair plastered to his forehead, suit jacket shredded by bullets. I didn't know his name. I didn't know he was Damon Black. "Reed, you're up!" Dr. Patel shouted. "Room 3, now!" My hands moved before my brain caught up. Gloves, mask, IV line. I pressed both palms hard against the worst wound, feeling warm blood pulse between my fingers. His heartbeat was weak, erratic, barely there. "BP's dropping. He's losing too much." Two uniformed cops stood at the doorway, arms crossed, watching. One of them muttered loud enough for me to hear, "Let him go, nurse. Chicago's better off without this bastard." I glanced up for half a second. Their eyes were cold, expectant, waiting for me to slow down, to make a mistake, to let nature take its course. My stomach twisted, but my hands didn't stop. "Page cardio and vascular. Tell them we need the OR yesterday." I snapped, voice steady even though my pulse roared in my ears. I had seen death too many times on the South Side. Kids with knives in their bellies, mothers bleeding out from domestic calls. Tonight felt different. This man, whoever he was, carried something heavier than just bullets. Something that made the whole ER hold its breath. We worked on him for 4 brutal hours. I stayed through every second, monitoring, suctioning, handing instruments, whispering numbers to the surgeon when his pressure crashed again and again. At one point, my legs shook so badly I had to lock my knees just to stay upright. When the last suture was tied and the monitors finally steadied into a slow, stubborn rhythm, I stepped back. My scrubs were ruined. My hands trembled as I peeled off the bloody gloves. He was alive. Barely, but alive. 3 hours later, just before dawn, I was checking his vitals in the ICU when his eyelids fluttered. Dark lashes lifted. Steel-gray eyes locked onto mine with terrifying clarity. For a long moment, the only sound was the soft beep of the heart monitor and the distant hum of the city waking up outside. His voice came out rough, cracked, barely above a whisper. "You saved me." I swallowed hard, adjusting the oxygen line near his face. "Try not to talk. You lost a lot of blood." He ignored me. Those eyes never left my face, studying me like I was a puzzle he needed to solve before the next breath. A faint, dangerous smile ghosted across his lips. "You just pulled the devil back from hell, Ava Reed." My name on his tongue sent ice down my spine. How did he know my name? He reached out slowly, fingers brushing the edge of my wrist. The touch was feather-light, yet it burned. "I owe you a life," he murmured. "And in my world, that kind of debt doesn't disappear." My heart slammed against my ribs. I pulled my hand away gently but firmly. "Sir, you need to rest. You're safe here." His laugh was weak, but it still carried darkness. "Safe?" He closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again, sharper than before. "You have no idea what you've done tonight." He leaned his head slightly closer, voice dropping even lower. "You saved Damon Black. From now on, you belong to me." The words hung in the dim ICU light like smoke. I stood frozen, the weight of what I had just done crashing down on me. One act of duty, one choice rooted in the oath I took years ago, and suddenly, the invisible line between my ordinary life and the shadows of Chicago had been shattered, because the man lying in that bed wasn't just another patient. He was the kingpin who ruled the city's underworld with blood and fear, and I had just dragged him back from death's door. As the first gray light of morning crept through the blinds, I realized with a quiet, terrifying certainty, my life would never be the same again. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do opens the door to the darkest kind of danger, but it can also become the spark that lights a path through the shadows. This story is about exactly that, how one moment of compassion can pull two broken souls into a storm neither of them saw coming, and how love, against all odds, might be the only thing strong enough to survive it. The hospital discharged Damon Black on a cold Thursday morning. I wasn't there to see it. I had begged for the day off, telling my supervisor I needed rest after the long trauma shift. In truth, I just couldn't face those steel gray eyes again, but the world refused to let me forget. 2 days later, I walked into Mia Torres's room on the pediatric oncology floor carrying her favorite strawberry yogurt. The 9-year-old girl looked up from her sketchbook, her small face pale but bright with excitement. "Ava, guess what?" Before I could answer, the head nurse pulled me aside in the hallway. "Her entire remaining treatment balance has been paid in full," she whispered, eyes wide. "Anonymous donor. They even covered the experimental drug trial in New York. Everything." My stomach dropped. I knew who it was. That evening, I felt them for the first time. A black SUV with tinted windows sat across the street from my apartment building. It didn't move. It didn't leave. When I stepped onto the sidewalk the next morning to catch the bus, 2 men were already there. One leaning against a lamppost reading a newspaper he wasn't actually reading, the other pretending to check his phone near the corner. Connor Kane and Jax Harlan. I recognized their names later when I searched online in a panic. They were Damon Black's most trusted men. Everywhere I went, they followed at a careful distance. Not close enough to speak. Just close enough that I never felt alone. It made my skin crawl. On the 3rd night, I couldn't take it anymore. I marched straight toward the SUV parked under the broken streetlight and banged on the driver's window. The glass rolled down slowly. Connor Kane looked up at me, his face calm but hard. "Miss Reed." "Tell your boss to stop," I said, voice shaking with anger. "I don't want his money, I don't want his protection. I saved his life because it was my job. That's it. Leave me alone." Connor didn't blink. "Mr. Black doesn't see it that way. A life for a life. That's how he balances the scales." I stepped back, fists clenched at my sides. I didn't ask for any scales. The window rolled up without another word. That same night, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press the button. "Ava." His voice was low, smooth, and far too intimate for a man I had only spoken to once while he was half dead. "Damon," I breathed, hating how my name sounded on his tongue and how my own voice trembled saying his. "You're angry." "Of course I'm angry," I snapped. "You're invading my life, paying bills I never asked you to pay, having your men follow me like I'm some kind of prisoner." There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his tone had softened, but the steel underneath remained. "Mia Torres would have died in 6 weeks without that treatment. You know it. I know it. Consider the debt partially paid." Tears burned behind my eyes. "You think throwing money at a sick child makes us even? You think that gives you the right to own my every move?" "I'm not trying to own you, Ava. Not yet." The quiet confidence in those 3 words sent a shiver down my spine. "I'm keeping you safe," he continued. "There are people who would use you to hurt me. I won't allow that." "I never asked for your protection." "You didn't have to." The line went dead. I stood in my tiny kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. The worst part wasn't the fear. It was the small, shameful flicker of relief I felt knowing Mia now had a real chance to live. 2 days later, Uncle Marcus showed up at my door. Detective Marcus Hale looked exhausted, his badge clipped to his belt, eyes heavy with the kind of worry only family can carry. He didn't waste time. "I know what happened at the hospital," he said, stepping inside without being invited. Damon Black. Ava, you need to stay as far away from that man as possible. I crossed my arms, trying to hide the tremor in my hands. I'm not involved with him. Marcus laughed bitterly. Sweetheart, you saved his life. In his world, that makes you involved whether you like it or not. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. His father was the reason your dad died. You remember that night? The car explosion? The closed case that was never really closed? The old wound ripped open instantly. I remembered the knock on the door when I was 14. The two officers standing there with hats in their hands. Mom crying so hard she couldn't stand. Yes, I whispered. I remember. Marcus placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. Then listen to me. Damon Black is poison. Whatever he's offering, money, protection, gratitude, it always comes with chains. Walk away now, before those chains get tighter. He left me standing alone in the silence of my apartment, the weight of the past and the present crushing down on my chest. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. Gratitude and hatred twisted together inside me like two snakes fighting for the same heart. I hated Damon Black for dragging me into his darkness. I hated myself more for the tiny voice in my head that whispered he might be the only one who could keep Mia alive. And deep down, buried beneath the fear and the anger, a quiet, terrifying question began to grow. What if the man who ruled Chicago's underworld was capable of something more than just violence? What if the debt he claimed I owed him was only the beginning? Pan Ba, the cage of protection. The knock came at Haigyo Moibe Futsang. I had barely fallen asleep when the sound shattered the silence of my apartment. 3 sharp raps, then a low voice outside the door. Miss Reed, open up, it's urgent. My heart slammed against my ribs. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept beside the bed and crept to the peephole. Vincent Vinny Morales stood in the hallway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. Blood stained the cuff of his shirt. Behind him, Connor Kane scanned the corridor like he expected bullets at any second. I cracked the door an inch, chain still on. What do you want? Vinny didn't waste words. Someone saw you with the boss at the hospital. They put a price on your head tonight. We need to move you, now. Before I could answer, Jax Harlan stepped into view carrying a duffel bag. Boss's orders, you're not safe here anymore. Fear clawed up my throat. I thought of Mia sleeping peacefully in her hospital bed, of my sister Nadia working the late shift at the diner, of the normal life I had fought so hard to keep. I'm not going anywhere with you. Vinny's eyes softened, just for a moment. Miss Reed, they already know where you live. If we leave you here, you won't see sunrise. 10 minutes later, I was in the back of a black SUV, clutching my coat around me, watching the lights of Chicago blur past. No one spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the engine and the heavy beat of my own pulse. The car finally slowed in front of a massive iron gate. Beyond it rose a stone mansion that looked more like a fortress than a home. Tall windows glowed with warm light, but the shadows around the property felt alive, watchful. Damon Black waited on the wide front steps. He wore a black shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing scars that crossed his forearms like old battle lines. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, those steel-gray eyes followed my every step as Vinny helped me out of the car. You shouldn't have come here, I said the moment I reached him, voice tight with anger and exhaustion. I didn't give you a choice. His tone was quiet, almost gentle, yet it carried the weight of absolute command. Not tonight. He turned and walked inside without waiting. I had no choice but to follow. The interior of the mansion stole my breath for a different reason. Marble floors, dark wood, art that probably cost more than my entire life savings. But it felt cold. Too perfect. Like a beautiful cage. Damon led me to a spacious guest room on the second floor. A king bed, fresh flowers on the nightstand, windows that overlooked a private garden. Luxury wrapped in silence. "You'll stay here until it's safe," he said, standing in the doorway. "And when will that be?" I asked, crossing my arms to hide how badly my hands were shaking. His jaw tightened. "When I've dealt with the ones who think they can touch what's mine?" The word mine sent heat and ice racing through me at the same time. "I'm not yours, Damon." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of sandalwood and something darker underneath. "You saved my life, Ava. In my world, that makes you mine to protect. Whether you like it or not." I turned away, staring out at the moonlit garden so he wouldn't see the tears gathering in my eyes. That first night I barely slept. Every creak in the old house made me flinch. Every distant voice outside the door reminded me I was no longer free. The next morning, I found Damon in his study. He stood by the tall windows, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a low, dangerous tone I had never heard before. "Make sure they understand. If they come for her again, I burn everything they love." He ended the call and turned. For a split second, the mask slipped. I saw exhaustion carved deep into his face, the weight of 1,000 decisions pressing on his shoulders. "You look like hell," I said before I could stop myself. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Comes with the territory." Silence stretched between us, heavy, charged. I surprised myself by speaking again. "Why do you live like this? All the blood, all the fear. Doesn't it ever get lonely?" Damon walked over to the leather couch and sat down slowly, as if every movement cost him something. "Lonely?" He let out a quiet breath. "Every damn day." He looked up at me then. Really looked. I was 14 when I watched my father get gunned down in our own driveway. I took over at 22. Since then, every friend, every woman, every person who gets close eventually becomes a target. Or a weakness. His voice dropped. So I stopped letting anyone close. Something inside my chest shifted. The hatred I had carried for days cracked just a little. I sat on the edge of the opposite chair, hands folded tightly in my lap. "I wanted to be a pediatric oncologist," I said softly. "When I was little, I used to tell my dad I'd cure cancer one day. Then he died, and my mom fell apart. I had to help raise my sister. The scholarship fell through. So I became a nurse instead. I stayed at County General because that's where the kids who have no one else end up. Kids like Mia." Damon listened without interrupting. His eyes never left my face. "When I saw you on that gurney," I continued, voice trembling, "I didn't know who you were. I just saw someone who needed saving. The same way those kids need saving. The same way my father didn't get saved." Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. "I hate what you are, Damon. I hate the world you live in. But I can't hate the man who made sure Mia has a fighting chance." He stood and crossed the room slowly. He stopped just inches away, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body. "I never asked you to like me, Ava," he murmured. "I only asked you to let me keep you alive." Our eyes locked. The air between us thickened, heavy with everything we weren't saying. Hatred, gratitude, fear, and something else. Something dangerous and magnetic that pulled at me against my will. I should have stepped back. Instead, I held his gaze, heart hammering so loudly I was sure he could hear it. In that moment, the cage around me didn't feel quite so cold. And that terrified me more than anything. Because for the first time since the night I saved his life, I wasn't sure I still wanted to run. Fan Bon. The choice that breaks everything. The rain had been falling for hours. I stood at the window of the guest room, watching silver sheets pour down the glass, when the call came from the hospital. Mia had taken a sudden turn. Her fever had spiked dangerously overnight. The experimental treatment was pushing her body to the edge. I didn't hesitate. Damon had the car ready before I even asked. Within 30 minutes, we were racing through the storm toward County General. He didn't speak during the drive. He simply sat beside me, one hand resting near mine on the seat, not quite touching. At the hospital, I ran straight to Mia's room. The little girl looked so small in the big bed, tubes and monitors surrounding her like a mechanical forest. Her dark eyes found mine and she managed a weak smile. "Ava, you came." I took her tiny hand and held it through the long night while the doctors worked. Damon stayed in the hallway the entire time, a silent shadow. At some point near dawn, the crisis passed. Mia's fever broke. Her breathing steadied. When I finally stepped out of the room, exhausted and trembling with relief, Damon was waiting. He looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "She's going to make it because of you." "No," I whispered. "Because of you. You made the treatment possible." In that instant, something inside me cracked open. The wall I had built against him, brick by careful brick, began to crumble. I couldn't pretend anymore. The feeling growing in my chest wasn't just gratitude. It was deeper, warmer, and far more terrifying. I was falling for Damon Black. The realization left me breathless. 2 nights later, the storm returned. I was reading in the library when the front door slammed open. Heavy footsteps echoed down the marble hall. Uncle Marcus burst into the room, rain dripping from his coat, eyes blazing with fury and pain. "Ava." He crossed the space in 3 strides and grabbed my shoulders. "I told you to stay away from him." Before I could answer, he pulled out a thick folder and dropped it on the table. Photos spilled out. Old crime scene images, yellowed police reports, my father's car, twisted and burned beyond recognition. My hand started shaking as I picked up one of the documents. Marcus's voice was raw. "Damon Black ordered the hit. Your father was about to testify against his old crew. He was the key witness. Damon made sure he never made it to the stand. It was business. Cold. Clean. Just another cost." The room tilted. I stared at the papers until the words blurred. My father's smiling face from an old family photo flashed in my mind. The way he used to lift me onto his shoulders. The way he promised he would always keep us safe. All those nights I had cried myself to sleep after he died. All the years I had carried that hole in my chest, and the man responsible was sleeping under the same roof as me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply stood up, legs numb, and walked out of the library. The rain was still pouring when I found Damon in his study. He looked up from his desk the moment I entered. Something in my face must have told him everything, because his expression shifted. From calm authority to quiet dread. "Ava, tell me it's not true," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me you didn't kill my father." Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Damon rose slowly. Rain lashed against the tall windows behind him, lightning flashing across his face. "I won't lie to you," he said at last. His voice was low, rough. "Your father was going to bring down half my organization. He had names, dates, evidence. At that time, eliminating the threat was the only way to survive." He took one step closer. "It was me. I gave the order." The words landed like bullets. My knees buckled. I caught the edge of the desk to keep from falling. All the moments we had shared in this house, the quiet conversations, the way his eyes softened when he looked at me, the terrifying pull I felt toward him, turned to ash in my mouth. "You let me care about you," I choked out. "You let me feel something for the man who took my father from me." Damon's hands clenched at his sides. For the first time, I saw real pain flash across his face. "I never planned for this," he said hoarsely. "I never planned for you. But you walked into my life the night you saved me, and everything changed." Tears streamed down my cheeks, mixing with the anger that burned white-hot in my chest. I can't stay here, I whispered. Not with you. Not knowing what you did. I turned toward the door. Ava. His voice stopped me. If you walk out tonight, I can't guarantee your safety. The people who want me dead, they'll come for you too. I looked back at him one last time. Then I'll take my chances. The rain soaked me to the bone the moment I stepped outside the mansion gates. I didn't look back. Every step away from that house felt like tearing my own heart in two. Because no matter how much I hated what Damon had done, a part of me still ached for the man I had glimpsed beneath the monster. The lonely king carrying a weight heavier than anyone should bear. But some debts were written in blood, and some choices, even when they broke you, were the only ones your soul could live with. The hospital felt different after I left the mansion. I threw myself back into the familiar rhythm of night shifts and endless charts. Every spare moment I spent with Mia Torres, holding her hand through another round of chemotherapy, reading her favorite stories until her eyelids grew heavy. At home, I helped my sister Nadia with her little boy, cooking simple meals and listening to her quiet worries about bills and sleepless nights. Life returned to its old shape, yet nothing felt the same. There was a hollow space inside my chest that refused to close. Every time the automatic doors of the ER opened, I caught myself looking for a tall figure in a dark coat. Every time my phone rang with an unknown number, my heart lurched before I forced it back down. I told myself I had made the right choice. Then the changes began, so quietly at first that I almost missed them. One morning, the head of pediatrics pulled me aside with tears in her eyes. An anonymous foundation just covered the entire cost of Mia's surgery. Not just this one, they're funding a new pediatric wing for the whole hospital. They want to name it after your father. I stood frozen in the hallway, the folder trembling in my hands. I knew who had done it. Weeks passed. Rumors drifted through the city like smoke. Damon Black was shutting down his old operations. One by one, the underground routes went silent. Money that once flowed through shadows now moved into legitimate businesses and medical charities for children in the South Side. I didn't reach out. I couldn't. But Vincent "Vinny" Morales appeared at the hospital cafeteria one quiet afternoon. He sat across from me with a cup of black coffee, his scarred hands wrapped around the paper cup. "He's burning everything down, Miss Reed," Vinny said softly. "The old crew isn't happy. Some of them want blood. I'm standing up as witness against the ones who refuse to let go. For him. For the man he's trying to become." He looked at me for a long moment. He's never done anything like this before. Not for anyone. I didn't answer. I simply nodded and stared into my untouched tea, afraid that if I spoke, the careful walls I had rebuilt would crumble again. The day of Mia's surgery arrived under gray skies. I stood outside the operating room for 7 long hours, pacing the sterile corridor until my legs ached. When the surgeon finally stepped out and gave me a tired smile, relief crashed over me so hard my knees nearly buckled. "She's going to be okay, Ava. The procedure went better than we hoped." That evening, as I sat beside Mia's recovery bed watching her sleep peacefully, the truth settled deep in my bones. People don't change because they say the right words. They change because they choose to act differently, day after painful day, even when no one is watching. The grand opening of the new Reed Pediatric Center came on a bright Saturday morning in early spring. Balloons floated above the entrance. Local news cameras lined the sidewalk. Children from the neighborhood ran across the fresh green lawn, laughing in a way that made my throat tight. I stood near the ribbon, wearing the simple blue dress Nadia had helped me choose, trying to keep my emotions steady. Then the crowd parted. Damon Black walked toward me. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, looking every bit the powerful man the city once feared. But his steps were slower than I remembered, almost hesitant. His steel gray eyes found mine across the distance and held. The entire gathering fell into a hush as he stopped right in front of me. Without a word, Damon Black, the man who once ruled Chicago's underworld, lowered himself to one knee on the warm pavement. Gasps rippled through the crowd. He looked up at me, vulnerable in a way I had never seen before. Rain from an earlier shower still glistened on his shoulders. "Ava," he said, voice rough but clear enough for everyone to hear. "I spent my whole life building walls and burning bridges. Then you walked into my darkness and showed me there was another way to live. I can't erase the past. I can't bring your father back. But every day from now on, I will choose to be the man who deserves even a fraction of the light you carry." He reached into his pocket and took out a small silver key instead of a ring. "This is the key to everything I own that's clean. The businesses, the foundation, the future I'm trying to build. I'm giving it all to you, not as payment, but as proof that I'm done with the old life. If you'll let me, I want to walk beside you, not as the devil you saved, but as the man who wants to become better because of you." Tears blurred my vision. Memories flooded in, the blood on his chest the night we met, the quiet conversations in his study, the pain in his eyes when he admitted the truth about my father, the empty ache I had carried since I walked away. I thought of Mia sleeping safely upstairs, of my father's name now shining on a building full of hope, of the man kneeling before me who had torn his own empire apart for a chance at something real. My voice came out soft, but steady. "I won't forget what happened, Damon. Some wounds don't disappear, but I believe in the man you're choosing to be, and I'm willing to walk with him." I reached down and took his hand. Damon rose slowly. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then he pulled me gently into his arms and held me as if I were the most precious thing he had ever touched. Later that evening, as golden sunlight stretched across the lawn, we stood together on the terrace of the new center. Mia sat nearby in a wheelchair, wrapped in a soft blanket, smiling at the balloons dancing above her. Nadia stood beside her, one arm around her son, watching us with quiet tears in her eyes. Damon's hand found mine. "I don't deserve this," he murmured against my hair. I squeezed his fingers. "Maybe not yet," I whispered back, "but we'll earn it. Together." In the distance, the city's skyline glowed against the fading sky. The shadows that once defined Damon Black had begun to retreat. And in their place, something new and fragile was growing, a light chosen deliberately, day by two broken people who refused to let the darkness win. Because real justice isn't found in revenge. It's found in the quiet courage to change, in the decision to love anyway, and in the beautiful, stubborn hope that even the deepest darkness can still learn how to hold the light. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blaze the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal/disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice, imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.